What are the best builds of 11-17? Well, after studying a ton of games and stats from Korean Challenger in the last couple of days, we are about to reveal 10 of the most unknown and broken builds you have to abuse this patch. What's up, GameLeaper? The Jizz? Oh, and yes, so during this video, make sure you write down the builds and runes we give you and give these a shot in your games. If they work in Korean High Elo, they will certainly work in NA Bronze. So let's get into it, and starting the countdown at number 10 is a build and champion combination not for the faint-hearted. Now, Gangplank got nerfed this patch, right? But he did receive a little buff in that his crit kegs are doing more damage. So building critical strike chance makes sense, which is why the Essence REAVER Rush GP is back on the menu. And what's even more red hot this patch is that Youmuu's Ghostblade got buffed, and this has seen some Korean Gangplanks go Essence REAVER into Ghostblade. These two items give you crit on hit, which procs off your Q and E, ability haste, damage, lethality, so you can shred through squishy enemy champions, and because your passive movement speed got nerfed, Ghostblade's own passive movement speed comes in super handy. After this, you can buy the Collector for more one-shot potential and crit, Infinity Edge because you will have 60% crit at this stage, and then Immortal SHIELDBOW as your mythic. That's right, your mythic is your last item. Now, Gangplank is in a precarious position because of the nerfs, and you are not going to win every game, but with this build, it patches up those weaknesses and enhances your strengths. Now, speaking of that Ghostblade buff, beating the GP crit Ghostblade build to number 9, well, this one starts with the new Ghostblade. Remember, it's 100 less gold and is now giving you 15 ability haste, and for a champion like Pantheon in the mid lane in particular, this is very scary indeed. The movement speed you get lets you run around the map in the mid game like a lunatic, allowing you to get into position quicker to use your ultimate. We all know how good lethality is on Panth in the early game, and the haste lets you get more Qs off when you combo an enemy champion and more ultimates off as well. It all makes sense. It's all really broken because in the mid lane, Pantheon crushes so many champions, so exploiting the movement speed you get from Ghostblade should be free. Just shove waves and roam, rinse and repeat. As for the rest of your build, you can buy Eclipse or Divine Sunderer next, take Eclipse for squishy enemy teams, and Sunderer for tankier teams, and then follow this with a Black Cleaver. Those are your core items: Ghostblade, Mythic, Cleaver. And if anyone has tested out this build or any of the builds in the video, make sure to let the Jizz and everyone else know in the comments. Now we have another whack build coming in at number 8 on the countdown, and this one resides in the top lane. You see, ever since Sunfire got nerfed in the early season and Kentank got nerfed not long after, Shen's mythic item spike has not been on the same level as Camille with Sunderer or Riven with Goredrinker, but with Frostfire Gauntlet, the Surgeon is back in business. And we all know this is making you tankier, but the mythic passive is the unique selling point. Getting 100 more health for each major item you have is huge. It gives you the scaling you lack so you're not useless late game, and you're still building Balmy Cinder and getting that Immolate passive to win lane. Now after the Gauntlet, buy Anathema's Chains. This gives you a whopping 650 HP and lets you cuck one of the enemy champions when you select them. And then it's really up to you. If you bought a Bramble Vest as your first buy, finish off Thornmail. If the enemy team has a bunch of crit, build Randuin's. If they have a lot of magic damage, build Abyssal Mask. So Frostfire Gauntlet Shen comes in at number 8. Now you're probably sick of hearing about bruises at the moment, so let's swing our attention down to the bot lane and talk about one build that has seen Korean Varus mains annihilate the competition. Now the key to this build is to not buy your mythic item. So a bit like Pantheon, you are rushing Ghostblade. Just make sure to still buy a tier early on. Then Manamune, Last Whisper for Serilda's Grudge, Edge of Night, and only as your last item do you have the Jizz's permission to buy Duskblade. The reason you don't need to buy it first is simply because you don't need it. You're really buying it for the haste mythic passive, but because Ghostblade is now giving you haste as soon as you complete it, it becomes less valuable. You're also getting the same amount of lethality from Ghostblade as you are Duskblade, and the movement speed comes in super clutch because as Varus you are very immobile and dying isn't that hard to do. Just keep in mind you can use this movement speed offensively as well, to get in positions to use your Chain of Corruption and piercing arrows. Definitely give this mythic less build a shot, it's very fun indeed. Now I know I've already mentioned a Frostfire build, but this one is going to surprise all of you. In fact, if any of you can guess the champion who I'm about to mention with Frostfire, I'll buy you some TSM slippers. Now to find out who this champion is, we have to head into the jungle, and what you want to do is run Ghost with your smite, and as Mordekaiser, you rush Frostfire Gauntlet. Jungle Mortarfryer. Your passive, the Frostfire Burn, and the ability haste you acquire give you the clear speed you need to keep up with common meta junglers, and it makes you way more useful in teamfights because you're tankier. Unless the enemy team just ints, it's very hard to make AP Bruiser Mord work in fights because you can get kited, and you still can, but you have way more survivability and you're not losing all that much damage. Buy Zhonya straight after and then buy Demonic Embrace. You're getting tankiness from both, a stasis to bait cooldowns, damage, more burn, and ability haste. At this stage, you will be near unkillable. Remember to run Ghost as a summoner spell because without it, you can't gank early game or chase down opponents late game, and no one knows how to play against this, so lock it in and terrify your enemies. Now speaking of terrifying, who has played played against a fed Warwick this season? No? Are you kidding? Well, with this build I'm about to give you, you have got to try him out. Now it starts with Blade of the Ruined King. For Warwick, the attack speed and lifesteal are crucial, and the passive health damage and movement speed are so useful as well. And then you want to build Immortal Shieldbow, not Divine Sunderer. For top lane, this makes you unbeatable in a 1v1, but just be sure to play for that 1v1. Grouping with your team is going to be your downfall of this build, so mute those pings and tunnel vision with this ridiculous lifesteal damage setup. Now we don't have many new AP builds coming in this patch, but I mentioned this particular champion and mythic combination in yesterday's tier list video. Make sure you check that out if you haven't already. And this starts with picking Gragas in champ select if you're a mid laner, and then rushing HEXTECH ROCKETBELT. With Sorcerer's Shoes, the magic penetration you get isn't enough to one-shot anyone, and the active is very beneficial because it allows you to make plays without your flash. Now if you know you're not going to get blue buffed by a tier early on and finish Seraph's Embrace after ROCKETBELT, but if you are getting blues, you can just rush damage. Lichbane, Zhonya's, Void Staff, Death Cap, whatever it is. Enemies will not know how much burst you have because it's a very rare pick these days, and it's also super satisfying to play and actually make work. Now for the top 3 rare builds of 11-17, and if you want to see more of this series, let us know by liking the video. It's also timestamped, and starting off the top 3, we are heading back to the top lane. I know how boring, but no, this build becomes so fun to play and actual broken once you buy this second major item. So the champion you have to pick is Garen, the low elo dream, and you start by building a stride breaker, but for your second major item, buy Mortal Reminder, and there are 3 reasons for this. The first is that the attack speed you get gives you more spins when you eat, so you're like a Beyblade on steroids. The crit you get also gives your spins a chance to crit, and the grievous wounds are pretty much essential at the moment in the top lane because of all the sustain up there. Whether it's a tank with second wind or a bruiser with Gore Drinker, even in Korean high elo by the way, Mortal Reminder Garen has been having a lot of success, so if it works there, it will definitely work in every other elo and region. Now beating Gats to number 2 in this countdown is a champion who is one of the best snowballs on the Rift, and she resides in the jungle. So for Kindred in 11-17, 99% of you are building Kraken Slayer or Gale Force as your mythic, and then building crit and attack speed. Well, it's time to stop, because this patch rushing Divine Sunderer and following this up with Wit's End then Runar's Hurricane is insanely underrated. Sunderer lost 5 AD, that's true, but the Spellblade passive is still there, and Wit's End got nerfed so the on hit is only scaling later in the game, but this is only bad if you rush Wit's End, which you won't be, so that's not an issue either. This setup is very similar to the Mordekaiser build because you're not giving up really any damage, but you're gaining so much survivability, which can be an issue for Kindred, especially without her ultimate. This means you are less reliant on that 2-3 minute cooldown and allows you to be really aggressive knowing you have the HP and resistances to survive whatever the enemy team throws at you. But all of these builds pale in comparison to the number 1 Korean build of 11-17. Now Zed may have been nerfed in the E and R departments, but his Q got buffed, and because Ghostblade is now giving you that essential ability he has and is 100 less gold, GHOSTBLADE RUSH Zed is the nut. For a roaming assassin to have access to that extra movement speed in the late stages of the laning phase lets you influence the map as well as anyone, and even in the lane it allows you to gap close to your opponent quicker and makes you generally more slippery and therefore harder to kill. Follow this with a Duskblade, Prowler's Core, or Eclipse and you are all set to snowball out of control. Now to master any of the champions we have mentioned, make sure you check out the GameLeap website for the best courses and guides ever made. They will help you escape elo hell because you will get that much better, trust me. And before leaving, make sure to hit that subscribe button, and until tomorrow's daily upload, this has been the GHOSTBLADE.